Hi guys, thank you very much for joining me. Polina here, talking to you about the full moon in Gemini on the 3rd of December 2017. Wow, why not? Why not? That's the general theme. As you may have noticed, the last few weeks have been a build-up, and I've been stating in my daily reports especially that we had to have a very steady ethic, because this is not really a year to fly off too fast and do too much. It was more of like a steady, measured vibration throughout the year, I feel. And this is it basically. We had to be steady, and we had to create a nice mature flow in Scorpio, and we had to keep it going throughout November and through December as well. But what happens is, quite often when we've got a slightly stagnant time, or like a time which brings things to fruition softly and kindly, sometimes we can see that we haven't taken the opportunities or the chances. We haven't yet decided what we wanted to do, or we haven't quite made the commitment that we thought we would, or perhaps we found ourselves stranded or alone. In which case, I feel sometimes great things can happen, because when you're in isolation, it's a kind of message for something greater to come than you've ever experienced. But unfortunately, not many people can have the conscious maturity to really cope with times of slight tapering. So we've had a extreme probably connection. We've had a few different things happen this year, and this month of November has been coming to a closure in a really nice constructive way, while also flickering and kind of flashing different opportunities that are meant to be like mildly opening doors and mildly creative conclusions. So it's meant to be mild, but here we go, and we've got a full moon in Gemini on the 3rd, which I feel is an accelerator. And for those of us who feel that we haven't yet matured, or we haven't yet fathomed enough, it is a need for closure. Like, rip the band-aid, rip the band-aid. Or on the other scale of this, try and do something very quickly. We also had Saturn go through Sagittarius recently, so it is not a really nice time to rush. Usually Sagittarius is like a really like winged horse type of time, where you can just, take a boat and paddle out to the middle of nowhere and enjoy yourself and create sunshine and love and connection anywhere. But this is not the type of Sagittarian time. It is more about closure, connection, trying to spice things up, trying to bring things to greater fruition that already have become. And also it's time to spruce up the last few brushstrokes on what you already have. So for example, if you've got a very interesting situation, for example, and it is kind of going good, what can you do to make it better? What can you do to make it grow and blossom? Or for instance, if you've got a really, really nice job and, you're kind of going okay, what can you do to make it more bearable or more interesting for you? So opportunities have to come out and grow out of the same root. So imagine that this has been a tree that's been growing, and how can you make that tree sprout more branches? How can you make it sprout more fresh growth instead of cutting it down and planting a new seedling, which will not last? This is not a very, very good time to rip at reality. It's not a fun ride later on. So this is a very interesting time where most of us might feel an air of inertia, or an air of just rip the band-aid, just do it quickly. Suddenly something can take hold of us and lead us to a conclusion really, really quickly, or make us want to make money fast, or make relationship quick and easy, or pretend that we don't know or don't hear something and still go for it, or cut corners and cut costs and do things really, really fast and flighty. And for most people, it isn't a good idea, especially if you are kind of concerned about, say, for example, your emotional, financial, or just physical states. And perhaps if you're somebody who's been thinking about changing things up a little bit, and especially if the awakening of Jupiterian Scorpio And this incredibly heavy and probably dense Sagittarian time after the passing of Saturn has taught you to perhaps become a little bit more measured and a little bit more considerate to yourself and other people, so that later you don't have to make those same mistakes again. So karma knocks on the door here for those who have not learned and that are not learning as to how to keep themselves more contained within their own field and how to become a bit more independent within themselves. So for yourself, as perhaps for me and many other people, there might be at least one chance to flicker. So perhaps for some people might be packing up a bag and going home. Perhaps it'll be the closure or the opening of a new thing, and it may even be like an opportunity with a new job. But watch out for those flickers that are out of the ordinary, because if it just makes sense and if it just sort of been brewing over time, and if you've got this and the idea of it doesn't really make you feel either or. So for example, if you've got a new person or you've got a new presence in your life, or you're sort of starting to jump ship a little bit inside here, and for you it is really, really like, I could just walk over the bridge and I've had this bridge built for a long time. Good for you. Good for you. So for example, I'm here in the Bay of Plenty and I'm living in this house, and it's not that big a deal for me to, for example, go from Bay of Plenty to Wellington, you know, and to see my mum for a while. Like, it's not a big deal, you know, just like walking over, hey, you know, this is my backyard. However, if you've got something or somebody brewing in the background, and especially to do with money, to do with crazy tasks, scary things for you, anything that is glistening isn't gold here, unless it is easy. So when it's easy and you're like, oh yeah, here's this, here's that, that's fine. But if it isn't, and you can kind of see that this could be a lot of meaning for you, it can hold a big piece of your life, I would probably say definitely don't. And the reason for that is because not everybody is equipped to make mistakes and then watch them, you know, watch things fall. It isn't the best time to jump into anything. It is not. And neither is it a good time to try and be extra gregarious or extra glossy or extra anything. It's actually a really interesting time to take it down a notch. So however you see Gemini is up to you. I've always been like surprised by how much splendor and diamond dust Gemini as an energy can generate whenever it can. So it almost like it does these little turns and twists which create a lot of practical and also impractical gold and gems, and maybe that's why Gemini is Gemini, because it is a star system. I feel it is energy of wealth and financial stability, and also anything that is shiny, beautiful and fresh. But this is also true. So yes to glitter, yes to beauty, but for some reason it feels to me that hold on to become too flashy or to become too sudden here, or to rip the band-aid too soon, or to do any quick actions right now with the sky would be a misery later for many. And unless you're somebody who often falls and creates a lifetime of getting up, falling, getting up, falling, getting up, falling, and if falling is not, you know, if falling is not a unusual quest, that's fine. Like, if you feel that life is about big ups and big downs, that's okay. But for most of us who kind of are trying to mend ourselves and create a more conscious life, or a more sturdy or stable financial and physical, maybe even for some people romantic and emotional security, it's not the best time to splash out. It's not the best time to pull the band-aid, or it's not the best frequency to suddenly disappear with somebody. Or on the other hand, to eventuate into a very quick gain, unless it's something that you're used to. So for example, if you're somebody who is a horse rider and you do stunts, you're a stuntsman or woman, and it is something that you do often, I would say to you, if you are planning on doing something really crazy around the full moon or before it, it might be nice to wear extra padding when you're doing the stunts. But also, if you win, if you succeed, you might have a lot more worth than you imagined. So this is an interesting thing. So one side to me suggests that there is great loss possible, and another side suggests that there is great gain. But for people who are stuck into a routine or feeling like they should, and are wanting to develop maturity and clarity and also creativity that is more sturdy and more subdued and stable, this isn't so great unless it is very, very minor, like tiny changes. For example, if you've been in a relationship for a very, very long time, it's time to introduce new strands of possibility, you know, like going somewhere nice, bringing new friends along, things like that. Do I think it is time to hop ship? No. So like if you've been with somebody for a long time and you're thinking maybe I should spice it up by introducing another person into the relationship, that's not a good idea, or opening the relationship to polyamory or any kind of non-monogamous things in a monogamous relationship, it's not going to work. But like for other people, for instance, if you've gone and you've done a few things and you've created a certain type of lifetime, a certain type of relatability that you have with yourself, and then suddenly you go, I'm just going to throw it all away and start a new lifestyle, that's not so good either. So it has to be, I feel, a new gloss, a new sheen, and a new sprinkle of diamond dust on what you already have. Otherwise it might turn. And this is the thing, is that with time you might see that there are certain types of patterns that subdue and accelerate. And occasionally after like a long subduing, we have a spike, just to release some gas, like just to release some air, and then there is a lull again. So for some of us, you might see that this momentum of the full moon can bring to greater climax and argument as well. Arguments are possible, so cockiness is very possible for people that feel that they've missed out, or they've created too much of like a subdued energy within which they feel they haven't gotten something. You know, like those people that feel, why am I always last? Why am I never getting anything done? Why am I not quick enough and somebody else gets my ideas? So there's jealousy. And if there's like worship of luck, or worship of gambling, anything like that, this can lead to a really immature conclusion, because this blowing of gas that is happening on the 3rd of on the 3rd of December is a great spike, but after this there is a lull. So for example, if you design it for yourself to jump into the arms of a person, of another person that you kind of don't know very well, and it hasn't been going that direction for a long time, you're kind of jumping into something. Basically, what happens here is you get this huge spike on the 3rd of December, so you haven't known them for very long, you just met them, and then you might actually see you're expecting an acceleration. So as the big bang of experience, you know, would create almost like the building of a galaxy that is your relationship, that kind of ends really quickly. So straight away you get a lull. So it's like a big bang and a lull very, very quickly afterwards, because it feels to me that December is going to be a very nice, quiet month for work and for connecting the dots that already are. And for those of us who are also used to other people or other experiences and things outside of ourselves being responsible for the acceleration of our feelings, you know, for the acceleration of our growth, this is going to be very hard. It might even be like, but you promised me this, you know, like jumping into a new career with this full moon Gemini, but you promised me that it would work out, or jumping into bed with somebody new, but you promised me that this would be beautiful, and then having a very weird lull, and perhaps the relationship could never be the same, or perhaps for some people, the energy of the lull, of this momentum, it's not even momentum, it's just like a letting off of gas. It doesn't even create momentum, just this splash, this flash of energy, can become a burden later. And that's really hard. So you might say, I'm just going to jump ship, I'm going to go from one country to another, and I'm going to book my flight. Be careful about flying, unless you fly all the time. I'm just going to run off, I'm just going to forget everything and run and do the thing. You might actually find that it becomes a burden very quickly. So the aftermath of the experience, unless you are always on the run, always gambling with reality, and always free to do whatever you like, which does exist in nature, probably 5% of people can pull it off. So unless you are the 5% of extreme enthusiasts, you might actually find that the splash was great, but then the aftermath could be very weird. It could be very wrong. For example, you meet somebody at a bar. We've got Venus before the sun, so it's like 12th house energy. You meet somebody at the bar, and you fall in love at first sight, and you might find that's my girl, or like that's my guy. And I'm also feeling that any kind of love and any kind of ambition of a relationship kind might be based on a mother-child relationship more than a father-child. So meaning this is a flame that is more for the toddler rather than for the man. So if you are suddenly like accelerating towards somebody, if you're a female, or if you find men attractive in general, you might actually find that what you find attractive, is not the father energy, it is the toddler energy. And what happens basically is the relationship starts up as a fresh spring of light. It's just like huge. It's almost like disgustingly giant and amazing. But then within just a few days, you might actually find that there is not enough energy to even talk. And this burning sensation of like a fresh love could become a burden, because it could be that the person becomes really depressed. Also, venereal disease is really rampant at the moment for some reason. And any kind of click also where you might find that this is not going to be something that you can say no to. Either they leave you with something that you then have to deal with for perhaps some of your life, or and maybe like the person, say for example, walks off somewhere, but then feels like they've got to tag along with you later, or they come back later, perhaps when you are in a relationship with somebody, and things can kind of like bump and grind a little bit, and how can I say, it can be sticks in your wheels later. Basically, that's what I'm saying. So be very, very careful about any kind of neurosis and any kind of it's now or never, rip the band-aid type of experiences. Another type of thing I feel is for the lucky ones. If you do want to gamble with life, create a pact with it that you'll be okay, like so how can I say, even though you might not be perhaps the only one experiencing this extreme maybe rush of luck, or this rush of feelings, you've got to make a pact and know that nobody's responsible for this later. So like, nobody's pushing you towards that shiny thing. Like, nothing is making you do the things that are out of the ordinary. And so you must know, or you must conclude on some level, that no matter what goes on and what does or doesn't become of this, has to stay between you and you. So this is the thing, is sometimes crashes are possible here, but they're not crashes that happen for all to see. And a lot of people that gamble with life or have a gambling spirit like an affection from someone else. They like to show another person what happened, or they like to share their wins and their losses with others, and they love to share the story of the great them, like the kingly, the crazy, the Robin Hood them. But this is not a time to share. So for example, if you are in an accident and you, for example, overestimate the speed on which you ride your motorcycle, you might find that when you fall, there's not many people later caring for you. So you have to pick up your own pieces. And why that is because we are trying to, I feel, establish a sense of maturity during this month. And also a sort of a settled stagnation which breeds within itself greatness that later becomes freedom. So that's a very, very uneasy task to learn for some people, especially those that have become accustomed to luck being the door every time, or through serendipity achieving something or even somebody without really having that much sensitivity or that much focus on the long-term energy. If, however, you have become someone who has been stranded for a long time, okay, so for example, you've been a hermit, or you've been a certain type of person who has stranded themselves in some way, and you have been a disconnected energy for quite some time, and you've probably worked for a long time, so it hasn't been a new ethic to learn. Perhaps you've been working out, or you've been doing breath work, or you've been trying to create a connection with God, and you've been trying, or really leading yourself along this path of long haul, perhaps isolation, like myself and a few other people, I'm sure, or any kind of situation where you are trying not to overstimulate yourself, and you've been working and you've been producing, or you've been somebody who's even in a bind with reality a little bit, which makes you feel like unless I get it perfect and unless I try my hardest to be subdued, my life is going to probably change for the worse. So if you're somebody who is afraid of innocence, or if you're somebody afraid of sparkle, beware, because for some of us, I feel during this time, the ones that have been hermits, or the ones that have been in the dark places, or working out of a cave, or working within oneself only, or have become a certain type of almost like a holy energy or a cave within themselves that invites others to join, like it's almost like a sainthood type of thing. Beware of also these types of energies that are suddenly wanting to come out and, for example, share themselves with the world a lot more. So, for instance, people coming out and saying, like, proclaiming, you know, I'm God, or I'm, you know, nobody, but at the same time I'm everybody. So people that are sort of like carrying a lot more into the world than it is possible for a human being to carry. So anything about people that have become hermits, gurus, or any kind of even self-proclaimed saints, there is a chance for these people in a good way to remember something great and to carry their presence with more pride, because Jupiter and Scorpio is connecting there for all psychics and esoterics. But also there will be a few, I feel, of us who are working in the shadow, or who work out of our own cave of consciousness, who are going to, I feel, come through and become the embodiment of Christ, or the embodiment of Buddha, which I think is an incredible thing for some, but in a sense it is very psychotic and it's very disorderly. But there is an energy of Christ consciousness settling into the grid, and there is a lot of us that I feel might feel that God is inside, but it is not an individual thing to any person. It is amongst all of us. So we are all sharing that energy. There is nobody that is Christ incarnate or anything like that. A new thing for me also for this full moon in Gemini is I feel fears. Fears can come true if you don't want to believe in love. If you aren't able to yet understand the bigger picture of life. I feel that for some of us, if we are really, really stagnant within our worlds, and sometimes we find excitement and fear. So exciting things, you know how I mentioned before, putting a sprinkle on things and making things glow a little bit more, but the things that already have been built, this can become a negative thing as well. You know, as you can see in this picture, half dark and half light, and that's what Gemini is. It is too. It is both in one, even though it's an air sign. It is a very, very deeply emotional, unconscious, but very, very matter-of-fact innocence on the outside, which I find very, very lucky for me, actually. I find that very interesting about this energy. But there's two. There's two. It takes two. It takes both light and dark to generate creation. This has to end, you know, people fearing, because in the Gemini energy, things cannot be discerned the same as other frequencies. So sometimes there is a laughter about the dark and a sadness about the light. There could be tears of joy, and there could be laughter of the mad. So sometimes, yes, we can create lucky strikes here. We can have luck. And for most of us who don't care to gamble with life, and we are trying to become more grounded and more positive, it can be very, very fun sometimes to see other people fall, or to see the fall as good, and also to shake a finger at other people and say, I told you so, or to perhaps, how can I say, recommend that people don't do something and then putting something in front of them as an example, like, don't do that, look at what happened to so-and-so. So having a dark smile is possible during this time, but it also for me means that a few people might even find fear attractive. So anything that is dark and toothy, any type of bondage, anything that is very, very sad and scary, or things that are very much out of the deep, they've got to be left to the side. So things that are very, very meaningful, things that are a bit toothy or scary, or in any sense too entwined with you, I feel have to leave, because I feel, as a collective, are looking for clarity and peace and all its fractals, you know, all its factors. We are trying to establish, I feel, collectively a nice joined neighborhood, perhaps, or a nice joined brotherhood or sisterhood, or both, or like family of people, as the next dog year should be a very nice communicative time. But this is, I feel, not for free. I feel sometimes during this type of passage, which might be really hard for some, we've got to let it go. If we see something or somebody or an opportunity or some kind of even like a crushing or crashing energy, we've got to let it go, and we've got to see things simply. And the simplest things, I feel, are physical things. Very, very easy to see yourself here during this time. It's a very frank time. You can potentially see what you really need. You can potentially see where you are in life. You might be able to see a lot easier what your body discovers for itself, how it functions and what it responds to. You might find it very easy to see what to and what not to do. You might suddenly also discover or rediscover what was lost as well during this time. So things that are missing can come back. And if you really, really, really want to keep it clear and keep it neutral during this moon, you can create a pact, perhaps, because it's an interesting time for this, a pact with nature and with yourself that nobody has to, yeah, I'm bringing this up again, nobody has to really know or hear or struggle with your truth or untruth in the future. And this is actually like, this is quite a big, I hope this is not too complicated. This is quite a big theme, I feel, for us. So I've noticed this actually a few weeks ago as past memories come up for many people as they try to describe themselves to another through their past interactions with reality and their past experiences. And I've noticed that when I'm talking about the past, I get really bored. Or the person with me starts talking about the past and I'm just feeling, no, this is not meant to be. So it's an interesting time to leave the past behind and to make a pact that no matter what happens with you, there is a greater future for us if we don't recycle and recreate the same stories with other people. And this is not to say to keep it all inside. For some people that is really, really helpful sometimes in nurturing to talk things through with another, but it is more than that. I feel it is about keeping positive and keeping things inside for greater prosperity. How can I say? It's about maturity and not splashing around stories that don't need to be told. It's not for everybody. I mean, for many of us, it is not the type of life where they're meant to keep things quiet. But I feel when I look at people also amongst, I find that a lot of the barriers between people, especially when they first meet each other and they're getting to know each other, is not in who each other is, but these stories that keep on following us around. And this might actually help, I feel, create a greater prosperity of spirit, which eventually creates greater greed, less abundance, if people can just let things go. And it's just like with things, you know, it's like something goes and then something comes in. So it's like you let go of somebody or something, and then you have somebody else or something come into your life, because it's just how nature works. I feel this is the same for this type of thing. So we've got to let go of these stories and these ugly truths or untruths that we've got about people and these sad situations, you know, like my mom said this, you know, or like, you know, my brother never connected with me, or anything like that can be very, very, very enigmatic for some still till next year. But I feel it's a really nice time, and this is heads up about the dog year in 2018, to start learning to be more civilized and in a way, by not continuing the same cycles of worth and not worth, by not draining another person through telling them a story which doesn't have anything to do with them. You know, by not bringing up the exes too much, you know, not bringing up mom and dad, and not connecting those bad stories that have happened with the new ones. Because I know it doesn't sound very sensitive, I know, because it feels to me that we're connecting to wonder here, and miracles are obvious in Jupiterian Scorpio, but they can be not bad ones. It could be a miracle that kind of mutates with time, or something that can become an offshoot of something else, and it can become very, very muffled and bland. Like say you meet like the perfect person, and you know, you start something, but something happens along the way, and you can't fix it, you know, like things like that, or you're apart or something like that. So things can get very, very messy if we aren't able to be positive and clear and in the now. This is a really, really big burden, I feel, for many people, being in the now, because they keep on reiterating the same stories, and they keep on coming up with same concepts and same experiences for each other, and for, you know, the new workplaces or the new relationships. This is about relationships in general, like any relationship that you have with anything, including with yourself. So relationships of the past and things to do with communions and commitments with people, and to situations that haven't been a blossoming experience for you, will have to, with time, become an old smile, like a wise old smile, without having to be repeated. So this is an interesting thing. So this is not for the weak at heart. For the next 2 or 3 months, I mean, as we are in the last part of a rooster year, try to see it's not about them, it's about me. This is hard because people have been so used to putting themselves in context with others and putting others in context with them, taking things too personally and becoming too caught up in things. And this is a very, very nice idea during this type of time, to not take things more than face value. So not to get too personal about things, not to be too bullshit about things, not to take things into too many thoughts, you know, not to make it too big a deal, because it sort of becomes a burden later because of this, because we've got too many inner stories that we've built that we can't shatter, we can't get rid of. So definitely till the end of February 2018, interesting time to start navigating your life without remembering so much and recalling, because the past becomes the future, and the present is all you've got to change your life. The present, so how you're connecting with this very now. What are you feeling? How are you going? What is your key? Like, what is your energy? And what are your triggers, or what is your fear, or what are your wonders, what is your bliss during this time? Because that's the only thing that I feel can really help us rewrite, by really being in the moment and being in the here and now, and feeling the bliss, because, you know, time is an illusion, and so is memory. This is actually quite an interesting thing, because all we have is now. And I also wanted to suggest, I actually watched this really amazing movie last night called, I don't ever watch movies, it's a very rare occasion for me. I watched a movie, not for the first time, but it was a good movie. I watched Waking Life, which I will put in the comment section below, and I'll put the trailer in there as well. It's an amazing movie, and it's got some really good concepts about this. So if you are somebody who is quite mind-orientated, as I'm becoming less and less with time, so explaining these things and talking about this is becoming not so easy, because my brain doesn't really have as much power as my heart now, because I'm more like a feeling-orientated person with time, as I'm learning to commit to myself. But yeah, like, have a look at this film. It's a really interesting concept of the journey through life, or the journey through death, which are basically the same thing. And there's a lot of interesting ideas on space and time, but I won't bore you any longer. I just wanted to say thanks so much for listening. It's been a really amazing time for me to be on YouTube. I don't know what I'm going to do next, but it feels to me that my channel may change. And thank you so much. I'm not doing the Ask Me Anythings anymore. I just have enough time to do private sessions, which will be, I feel, ongoing, probably throughout my life, perhaps. But yeah, so the channel might change. So if there's any difference in broadcast, I'm sorry about that. I'm creating a new program. So thank you very much, and I hope you've had a wonderful time, and enjoy this amazing transit. Bye. So this is Polina's Astrological Almanac 2018, and it is nice and glossy. There's a flower on it right now. Not anymore. Okay, so this is a very nice little planner. It's got a week-to-week type of layout, and involves lots of different things, including Mayan astrology, Vedic astrology, Native American astrology, Chinese astrology, and Western astrology, and it is a very handy little tool. It's also got the month ahead, so you can be super prepared with every sign stated and mentioned. And also it's just beautiful. It's just really lovely. It's lovely to hold. It's a nice size. It is cute. It's got lunar shifts and phases. It's got the year ahead for every sign. It has got the year ahead as well. Yeah, very handy. And also at the back of the book, we've got a barcode. And beside the barcode, we've got notes and retrogrades. So everything you need to know about the mainstream retrogrades for the year. And also the lunar phases. And so not just full moon and new moon as I usually do on YouTube, so third quarter and first quarter moons as well. And yes, it's a handy little book. I love it, and I hope you enjoy it as well. And yes, of course, equinoxes and solstices are there too. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you like my book. It is $5 off Amazon, and it is a perfect gift for New Year and Christmas time. Thank you. Bye.